Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Happy weekend to you. Happy December. Josh with Josh the Severe Weather here to talk about what's in our future here in the next couple of weeks. And you've heard me mention that winter could be a little bit more interesting than what we've had here starting off in the month of December. I'm going to share my screen with you and let's go ahead and get to it here. So, it's not been a bad start to the weekend here. We had some rain on the eastern seaboard, but mild temperatures and some cooler weather coming here the next couple of days before it warms right back up. We're not ready yet to have that assault of colder air that's been hitting parts of the upper Midwest and, of course, much of Canada here over the last several weeks. But there are things that we are going to keep an eye on as we get later into next week, towards Friday, maybe into the first part of Saturday. We'll be tracking an area of low pressure that is expected to move across the midsection of the country on Thursday. Friday, it gets into the Ohio and Tennessee valleys. It will make it to about Charleston, West Virginia, and then reform off the coast. And the big question mark is how much cold air are we dealing with this storm? I will show you some model differences. I'm going to show you which models I like, which ones I don't trust. And from there, I at least have to try to take a stab at what we're looking at here in about 6, 7 days from now. There is certainly going to be a change in temperature for those of us here in the mid-Atlantic and Northeast after some mild air moves in. It's going to turn cooler. A large area of high pressure is expected to drop down into the eastern United States from Canada, and how strong that cold air is going to determine what kind of potential precipitation we're looking at and also how much moisture is available. Anytime you get low pressure with cold air in place off the eastern seaboard, you've got to watch precipitation types. We haven't had really a setup like this yet. We've had storms coming out of the southwest with cold air getting involved. This will be, I wouldn't say a clipper system, but something coming kind of more out of the west northwest. And now that we're in December, meteorological winter with cold air in place, snow cover across a good part of Canada, we definitely have something that we're going to be talking about at least for the next several days. So I've kind of highlighted some areas that we're going to keep an eye on for potentially wintry weather. That includes sleet, freezing rain, snow, or even rain ending and icing up as temperatures get colder. Either way, some impacts that we have to watch out for. And right now, the better chance that we could potentially have issues as we head into late Thursday night, Friday, will be in the Great Lakes region around Chicago, maybe south of Detroit, Toledo, Cleveland. How far north that gets will of course will be determined by this track of this low pressure system here in the Ohio Valley. The farther north it gets, the less likely cold air drops down. But with cooler air coming down from Canada east of the Appalachians, we could have a setup where colder air bleeds in and any kind of precipitation turns wintry. Not saying DC is going to get accumulating snow at this point, but chances are higher than they've been yet this season. Pennsylvania could have a little bit better chance, especially when you get into the higher elevations. Philly, New York, we're going to keep an eye on things at this point as we head to Friday night, Saturday morning. Not set in stone by any stretch. But something we're going to keep an eye on here if the general consensus of these models continues. We've seen some back and forth in our models, and I'm going to get into that as well. So let's take a look here at the GFS model, and this is Thursday night, Friday morning from Pivotal Weather, and I'm not a subscriber to that, so you'll see a few ads. I apologize for that right away. This is the latest run of the GFS model, and it shows low pressure track south of Chicago, which means rain in Chicago may be ending as flakes in Milwaukee, rain across the Ohio Valley, and then eventually a little bit of snow tries to sneak in here late Friday afternoon into Friday night across mainly higher elevations. Now, the GFS model has not been one I've been trusting lately. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. If we go back several model runs to, let's say, back to maybe Friday. Oh gosh, I'm sorry, it just moved me away here. But if we go back to Friday, you can see we had a much colder look at things. In fact, snow was predicted all the way down to Richmond and the North Carolina border. Now, if we move that forward a couple of model runs to Friday afternoon this time, yesterday, you can see that the threat for wintry weather just did not even exist on this frame. We had some across interior New England. Very little consistency run to run as to how strong that high pressure that's going to bring down some cold air is really going to be. Fast forward a couple more models, the operational GFS shows the cooler air moving in on Thursday and then some rain and then really nothing to write home about, just a little bit of rain dropping down on Saturday, and really still mild in parts of Virginia and North Carolina, at least Friday night into Saturday morning before it does start to cool down. But really no press of cold air. Now we get over to 12Z, that is the late morning run for Saturday, which I just showed you. And in comparison, we see low pressure tracking up into the Great Lakes and really no sign of snow behind it. It does get a little cooler, but it stays mild. This is definitely a model that has been more volatile than ever. I'm going to talk more about that. But if we look at some of the other models that I tend to trust a little bit more, let's peek at the European, which I believe has been doing at least a little bit better job here. And, we may say later on a lot better job, depending on how this plays out. You can see low pressure tracks through the Ohio Valley. This is Friday morning, wintry precipitation in Pennsylvania, and then maybe Philly and New York get something on the back end of it before the system heads out to sea. This is the latest model run. If you go back to the run before it, I'll show you guys that kind of more of the same here. The exception being not as much moisture in play, but that low pressure track is farther down. So it gets colder in Virginia and North Carolina than what the GFS is saying. And really not just colder, but significantly colder. So where the front ends up makes a huge difference. But with this run of the European, there's just not a lot of moisture left. The cooler, dry air takes over, and it's going to be a chilly end to the week across the Northeast. Looking at the Canadian model, this one has shown us a little bit more consistency from run to run. And I do like consistency, assuming that it's doing the right thing. But you can see here the storm track is kind of a blend from what the GFS was trying to do between its models. You see some wintry weather moving into Chicago Friday evening, and then we see cold air bleeding down the eastern side of the Appalachians into Virginia early on Saturday. Not heavy amounts of precipitation, but nonetheless, maybe some potential accumulation in the DC area back to the Shenandoah Valley. And then this kind of heads out to sea. Right now, it's really way too early to make any kind of call. The only thing I'm going to tell you guys is that the GFS is just wild and all over the place, whereas the Canadian model and the European model have a kind of a more of a consensus as to what they believe is going to happen. So my gut says let's just not go with the GFS until it shows us that it's going to be consistent. It's really been kind of misbehaved for quite some time. And I'm not embarrassed to say it because I'm not the one who developed the GFS model. I just try to apply it, but we've seen some crazy stuff. Let me give you all an example. This is what it was supposed to look like this afternoon from a couple weeks ago. The GFS had a Category 4, maybe 5 hurricane just south of Cuba. And if you look at the satellite image, it's a beautiful day on the Isle of Youth in Cuba. So nothing like this. And this wasn't the only model run that showed a hurricane, by the way. We had several model runs, and then finally it lost that idea and said, okay, nothing's going to happen. Yesterday, I saw like a Category 2, I think, in the central Atlantic. Wherever you are, Owen, I don't think you're gonna be an issue at this point. So the thing that upsets me about the GFS model is that a lot was done to upgrade it back in March 2021. That was released. And since the upgrade, I think it's just gotten progressively worse. More extreme ideas, more hurricanes being predicted than ever in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico. Just completely out of phase with what's happening. Eventually it gets it right, but even like the big winter storm from last winter in the Northeast, it didn't really even come close to where the heaviest snow band set up until maybe a day or so before that happened. So it just makes you wonder, how much can we really trust the GFS model? And I'm going to show you guys when we get more into the longer term what I'm talking about. These are the ensembles showing the upper air pattern. Blue indicates lower than average, or stronger than average trough, whereas this shows a stronger than average ridge. Ridges tend to lead to milder air and troughs to cooler air or stormier weather. Of course, that all varies, but this is once we get past this time next weekend into the following week, you can see the GFS ensemble run from 2 runs ago was showing a very mild look here in the eastern United States with all the storminess well offshore. Now, if you take a look at the European, you can see the ridge that was here is actually back in the Four Corners region, and the trough that was out here is sneaking back into the central eastern United States. That is quite a difference to see that from the GFS to the European. This is from weatherbell.com subscription. Even the Canadian even shows even more colder than average 500 millibar heights. So a stronger than average trough on the East Coast. This is what we want to see if we're rooting on cold air and wintry weather in the eastern United States. But what we don't want to see as meteorologists is this kind of disagreement between all these models. We're only talking 1 to 2 weeks out at this point. We're looking at the upper level pattern, and it's just completely different from model to model. Even the GFS ensemble, if you go back and look at the latest run, you can see, oh, now we're starting to see what those other models are seeing. But I mean, there's just no agreement here. It's just completely like, are we late to the party here? Like, what's going on? Even we showed this a little bit yesterday at this time, and then we backed off, and it's like everything is completely out of phase. The European, on the other hand, if you look at each model, it's been a lot more consistent. There just hasn't been the amount of complete. This is not out. Don't freak out. This is this week. We haven't gotten the European ensemble for next week yet. So regardless, just no consistency. Even the Canadian model, if you look back a model run, you look back another model run, on average, it's sticking to the plan here. And it's sticking to my forecast that we are going to see colder air coming into the eastern United States once we get to another week or so from now. So I'm going to stick with that forecast. But if you guys have any questions or concerns about that, I'm happy to answer them. It is a forecast. I will tell you, I've been doing this for over 20 years. Forecasts change all the time. As we get more of a handle on what's going to happen, you, of course, will get more videos from me and more details. But if you're one of those people that really just needs to know what's going to happen as you start traveling and planning for the holiday season, we do have to look at the longer range. We do have to take stabs at things. And the beat that I'm marching to at this point is a colder beat here in the eastern United States. If you look at the Climate Prediction Center, they do show a slight risk of heavier snow from the 10th to the 14th here in the Midwest and Northeast, even into Virginia. So it's 20%. I mean, that's kind of looking at all the models and saying, okay, look, if we're going to predict maybe a potential storm that could happen here next weekend into the following weekend, it would potentially be in this region here. But again, this is just experimental. We've got a lot of things that we're going to be looking at here in the next several weeks. But I will be honest with you, the performance of the GFS over the summer with hurricanes has just been pitiful. And now looking at what it's looking at with potentially milder than average weather, where everybody else is shown to being colder, to me, it's just completely amazing. I mean, this wild hurricane was just one of many that it was predicting. You may have seen them out on the internet. I did share them, but I gave you context and just said, look, this is what it's showing, but I'm not putting a lot of stock in it at this point. I was going to show you guys one other thing. I really hope I can find it here. Where are we? Come on. Maybe I closed it out. All right. Here we go. Since that March 2021 notorious upgrade of the GFS model, I'm going to ask you guys to flush after using. And I'll tell you what, be nice to your family and friends and give it a courtesy flush afterwards. Get that thing out of here. I'm not saying don't ever look at the GFS, but if you're looking beyond a few days from now, it's la la land. That's all it is. I don't expect it to continue to be a viable model unless something else gets changed after this point. That's where I'm at with the GFS, to be honest with you. I think a lot of the experts out there do as well. So anyway, I really appreciate y'all's time. Thank you so much for watching. I'll give you guys new content daily. I'll do my best to get you a video every day. Please like and subscribe to my channel if you care about the weather, if you want to hear it from me. Also, if you could follow me at facebook.com/JoshUSevereWX. That, of course, stands for weather, for more pertinent updates and more content that may be involving severe weather that comes up and major weather changes and forecasts as well. I really appreciate y'all's time. Hope you have a blessed day and a blessed weekend, and we'll talk again soon. Take care.